Welcome to my updated guide to the Infinite Orb Sorceress. As I begin my push past tier 70 Nightmare Dungeons, I wanted to give y'all an update to all of the changes I've made to my previous build. If you haven't watched my previous take on this build, the link will be in the description. As you may have noticed, I am still not using Frost Nova, and I have attempted to make this build work with the Frozen Orb enchantment. I've also removed Arc Lash and subbed in Blizzard. Blizzard is not used for damage, but instead for mana regeneration and more consistent freezing, which both were a bit lacking from my previous iteration. I've always wanted to find a way to remove Arc Lash from the build, and I think Blizzard synergizes very well with this. I've able to get more consistent amount of lightning orbs out, since every time I deal cold damage to a vulnerable target, I gain mana. The build still relies heavily on Flame Shield for the bulk of its damage. Since it's our only fire source, our rotation consists of Blizzard into Teleport, then Flame Shield for the Immobilize for extra crit damage. Then you spam Lightning Balls, which during all this, a bunch of Frozen Orbs would also spawn, applying vulnerability everywhere. I've also added an alternative source of mana, and that is by picking up Crackling Energy. So after spamming a bunch of Lightning Balls, if your Blizzard didn't restore mana, you can also run around collecting Crackling Energy for more spamming. I can now reliably have more than like 10 ball lightnings out at one time, and sometimes as much as 20 plus with Unstable. This also makes our boss fights easier, because instead of just relying on our cooldowns to create mana, we have 3 ways to make mana. Frozen Orb with Blizzard, casting cooldowns, and picking up Crackling Energy. If you are also wondering, I did try using Frozen Orb on the skill bar, but found it underperforming. I didn't like the fact that the Frozen Orb doesn't explode at the position I wanted. Plus, it also has a lower lucky hit rate, so gaining mana is more difficult. Alright, starting with the changes to the skills. Since we no longer use Arc Lash, only 2 points into Arc Lash is all we need. Next off, I'm putting 4 points into Frozen Orb for Greater Frozen Orb. For our defense skills, nothing has really changed other than the extra point in Glass Canyon. If you find yourself, way too squishy, you can put this back into Teleport. For Conjuration, I've removed Precision Magic. I think Lucky Hit in general is bait. The benefit that you get for the cost that you invest in is not that good. So I went ahead and removed most of our Lucky Hit from our gear. For our Mastery skills, nothing really has changed other than putting Invigorating Conduit. This is how we're going to grab Crackling Energy and gain mana. Since we have, a amulet that gives 3 points in Mastery skills, we don't actually need to put any points in Blizzard. To get Mage's Blizzard for that extra 4-second duration, I think it's not really that worth it, because most fights don't necessarily need to last 8 seconds, and if it does last more than 8 seconds, you in higher tier Nightmare Dungeons, you will generally just reset, get your cooldowns back, and go back in. So you just recast Blizzard. For our ultimate skills, I'm now grabbing Frigid Breeze. This is how dealing cold damage against vulnerable enemies has up to 20% chance to generate 15 mana. So this is how our Frozen Orb and our Blizzard can have potential chances of gaining mana for us. Next off, I remove a point in Supreme Unstable Currents. Since we're casting so many ball lightnings already, there's so many Crackling Energy on the ground that you don't necessarily need this to not consume. You'll just have too much Crackling Energy at the end of every fight or during every fight. So it's really not needed for that point. So we can save a point right there. And obviously our passive Overflowing Energy, nothing has changed there. So going into the equipment, since we're using Blizzard, we're using this Blizzard aspect. We take less damage while standing in a Blizzard. Obviously, Raiment of the Infinite, baseline for every Sorceress build. Nothing to change here. This is how we're going to gain mana every time we stun people. And this damage increase to vulnerable enemies with a barrier. I think this is actually best in slot. Every Sorceress build needs to have this aspect. After doing testing, it actually increases your vulnerable damage. So this is certainly best in slot. So definitely taking that. Gaining armor aspect. Yep, this is kind of a baseline as well. Nothing else has changed on these pants. Same thing with our boots. Nothing really has changed. I do want to note though, the all stats, there has been a all stats change on the helmet. So you see that there are 2 all stats affixes on our boots and our helmet, and I will go into that once we get into Paragon. Our dagger, nothing has changed there. Frozen orb still will explode 3 times. Now this is the next big change. I was weighing the options between having the additional crackling energy aspect or this one, because a lot of Sorceress builds do use this one because of the triple dip damage. This is obviously best in slot if you're not doing anything real specific. After doing some math on, chaining the crackling energy, it reduces like between 15 to 20% of our cooldowns, which is quite significant. I do feel the difference compared to not using it. But since I'm playing in higher tier dungeons now, I don't necessarily need it because I can always just run away, reset, wait like 3-4 seconds is not too bad, and then go back in. So it's not really necessary to have, let's say 100% uptime on my unstable or close to that. It's not that needed for a higher tier nightmare dungeon. For our rings, nothing really has changed. We're still going with the lightning orbs and the prodigy rings. But you may have asked, like, since we're, why haven't I used, resource regeneration on these rings? I feel like you don't necessarily need it for this build since there's 3 sources of, mana regeneration. We don't need to waste an affix on, resource gen. I think it also, like, for example, putting resource gen will only increase, generating 15 mana on Frigid Breeze to like 18 or 19. It's not really that great. Same thing with our Invigorating Conduit, 15 mana, 3 extra mana, not really that good. And for our focus, nothing changed here as well. And our skill bar, we only changed 1 skill, the Blizzard. Everything else has stayed the same. I mean, the rotation is kind of similar to the first build. Before you engage, you're going to cast Blizzard, and then you're going to teleport right after that into Flame Shield, and then whether or not you have Unstable, you'll cast that and then start spamming a bunch of Ball Lightnings. And then from there, you'll just be running around, collecting Crackling Energy, doing damage along the way, and then recasting your Ball Lightnings over and over, and rotating between your 2 barriers. Now, for our Paragon. There's been quite a lot of changes since the first build. We still have 6 boards, but you notice I'm changing the way our ordering of the boards are, as well as our glyphs. With this particular setup, the reason why I did it this way is to grab this particular rare node here, which does damage reduction from elites. This section here is what I was considering trying to add into the build, but didn't have enough skill points. I was able to find a way to, basically squeeze water out of a rock to try and min-max this Paragon board as much as I could without sacrificing too much. So by, we still have our exploit, which is on our last board, our 6th board, and it's still at its maximum potential. Same thing with our static control glyph. Everything else, though, our adept has been moved. The adept moved from the first board into the second board for Burning Instinct. And this board right here, and basically the first and second board are our flex board, because you can always flex these 3 nodes here on our int. You can flex these 3 nodes here for willpower and int. And we still achieve basically combining our helmet and our boots for the all stats, the ability to unlock the bonuses on all our boards. So from here, this is, basically kind of as optimal as I could get it. So make sure you just follow this out. What we've gained and what we've lost is not really a whole lot, actually. We've gained, basically, compared to the first build, more damage reduction, about 20% or more. And we've lost, 30% damage on our mastery skill on adept. But the fact that I'm using territorial now, previously I was using unleash. By sacrificing, an affix, on the helmet, we are able to gain, another 10% damage reduction, as well as another, 77% damage to close. So we actually gained, another 40% damage and 10% damage reduction, and not including this one, which is another 30. So a total of 30 DR. And we didn't really lose any vulnerable damage. We didn't lose any control damage to control. So I think overall this is a win-win setup, and we are no longer grabbing these nodes here because, since Flame Shield is our only source of burning, while you're in Flame Shield, you're immune. So why have damage reduction to enemies that are burning? Seems pointless to me. So if you're running out of stats and you can't really achieve it, because a lot of this build really ends up on what you roll on your helmet, as well as your intelligence on your Ramen of the Infinite and your boots. I mean, I would say some places that you can flex your Paragon boards around, I would consider these two nodes right here. There's also a pathing here that you can take between here and here, where depending on your situation, you can go down this route. So you can mix and match a bit to try and achieve and unlock all the bonuses as you go. But for the previous build, there was not a whole lot of flexibility on our stats. In this case, you only need to check this rare node to make sure you've unlocked the bonuses. In this case, we have a 9 stat flex on the intelligence, right? As well as this node here on our Frigid Fate is a 7 stat flex. So in general, from our previous build, we had a lower amount of flexibility. Now we have a 7 stat flexibility. Not a whole lot, but I would prioritize this node if you can to unlock this bonus first before focusing on the 5th board to try and unlock these 3 nodes. I also want to make sure that the Frigid Fate is the 4th board. So the way the board goes is you go from the starting board to Burning Instinct, all the way to the 3rd board, Ice Fall. You do not go up to Static Surge until you go towards 4th board to the left side, Frigid Fate, and then you can start working your way up to Static Surge and Ceaseless Conduit. So make sure it's this way. If you don't have it ordered correctly, your requirements on these yellow nodes will be higher and you won't be able to unlock these. So make sure you do that. So overall, I'm liking the direction the build took. Clear speeds are much faster. There are probably only a few tweaks left in the Paragon board. I'm also weighing options on subbing out Unstable Currents with Inferno for more consistent burning, instead of just relying on Flame Shield. But if you've made it this far, you're a Chad. Thanks for watching. Make sure you leave a like and a sub. Check me out on Twitch. I'll keep providing more updates as I start pushing past tier 70 and 80. I think once I hit tier 80, then I think the build is ready for tier 100. It's just a matter of getting the right sigils. Higher tiers like that are all just, one shots anyway. So thank you all for watching. This is me signing off. Peace.